welcome to Game Day U Hoops. I'm your host, Addie Crawford, and join with me tonight are analysts Stone Webber, Dylan Rivera, and Jimmy Wicks. We have a very exciting show for you tonight, but before we do that, let's go back to last Sunday where the Sooners' NIT tournament run sadly came to a halt with a heart-wrenching 70-68 loss against St. Bonaventure. A shot by Marvin Johnson in the closing seconds of the game fell short in yet another one-possession defeat. Now let's dive right in. Looking back on the Sooner season in Porter Moser's first year as head coach, there's definitely been a lot of highs and a lot of lows. So Stone, let's start with you. What can Sooner fans take away from this season?
I would say overall this year for OU, I would say it's a little underwhelming. Going into this year, I predicted OU was going to make the tournament, but then I also didn't predict Elijah Harkless was going to have a season-ending injury, and OU was going to win 3 of 15 games in the middle of conference play. The story of this team, they were very close. They were one basket away against Texas Tech in the semifinals from punching a ticket to the NCAA tournament. They also had a 2-point loss at Kansas, a lot of other close games throughout the year, but they did win 5 of 7 to finish the season, so I think there was a lot of optimism going into next year.
Emphasize something that you just said right there. A lot of close games, right? 9 one-possession games. You know what the record was in those 9 one-possession games? Do you know? 2 and 7. 2 and 7 was their record in those 9 one-possession games. A lot of games came down to the wire, but they just didn't finish there at the end. One of them that you mentioned there is that Kansas game, right? That 2-point loss to Kansas. They lost by 3 points the first time around, and then 4 wins over top 15 teams in the country. So they have a lot to their resume, but then just fell short here and there. Had that #1 Auburn game right down in Auburn, Alabama, in a 3-point game with 12 minutes left. Ended up losing that one. Closed the gap on Baylor on January 4th multiple times. Brought it to within a 6-point game 9 different times in the second half alone in their second game of Big 12 play. So they were very active, did a great job this season, but just fell short in a lot of those close games.
Right. I'm going to agree with you guys. I think the season was a little bit disappointing under Porter Moser for the first time. The consensus around this team was to be kind of like a middle-of-the-pack Big 12 squad, which is no small feat, but it ended up being one of the bottom feeders in the conference, going 7 for 11 in conference play. The season wasn't a complete letdown in my eyes, but it didn't really live up to the expectations that we'd like to hold ourselves up to. This team was plagued with inconsistent play and losing streaks. Everybody remembers the dreadful 2-8 January and struggled leading up towards tournament time. Going into conference play, the Sooner squad looked really good with wins over Florida and Arkansas, but once conference play started, everything started to fall apart, and this team wasn't a consistent threat in the Big 12. Along with consistent struggles defensively, scoring was also hard to come by, even with the amount of experienced leaders like Groves, Goldwire, and Harkless. All in all, it wasn't a complete train wreck, but also missing the tournament was a big blow to the Sooner squad.
And I know none of us touched on it, but I feel like all of us can kind of agree on the fact that the Sooners seemed to play to their opponent's skill level, right? They were in a game at Allen Fieldhouse. They played well at Baylor. They played well against Baylor and Kansas at home, but they got blown out by Iowa State and blown out by Texas Tech on the road, which ultimately I think was their undoing.
Yeah, I think another thing that we didn't mention, you kind of touched on it with the offense and stuff like that, is the turnovers. I mean, they turn the ball over a ton, and that's something that you normally see from young teams, not teams with veteran leaders, but it's also something that you see from teams that have been kind of thrown together in one year like this team was. So I think for this first season of Porter Moser, with a lot of guys who have just kind of been yanked from different places around the country to play here and play well, is a good sign.
Right, and you would think with all these like senior leadership that you would be ball moving around, everybody kind of get adjusted, but he seemed really kind of stagnant in the half-court offense. It was really just kind of, you get in transition, that's great. If you can't, the team kind of stops that and rebounds well, then they're really put in a bad spot, and you kind of saw that throughout the entire season.
Okay, so it's safe to say that there's definitely some room for improvement. So my next question is, what can the Sooners do to be better next season?
2 answers. The first one here has to do, why did the Sooners win 5 of their last 7, and what was the reason they went to the Final Four in 2016? Was that they shot the 3 ball very well. During their 5-game win streak, or their 5 last wins of the season, they shot 33, 40, 44, 52, and 48% from behind the arc for an average of 43. These shooting performances show that OU can shoot from deep, but they just didn't do it consistently enough. A huge deal for this team also is going to see if Emoji Gibson comes back, which I think he is their best shooter, and he might be their best player going into next season. And another thing is length and defense. We all know Porter Moser loves his defense, and a lot of that has to do with recruiting and the guys you want playing for your team. They have 2 recruits coming in next year, Otega Owe, a 6'6 shooting guard from New Jersey, and Milos Uzan, a 6'4 point guard from Arizona. These guys will help disrupt the opposing team's offense and help create those transition buckets.
Well, you and I sort of see eye to eye on that one. You kind of actually started to step into my answer a little bit. But my main answer is the Sooners need to focus on bringing Mo Gibson back and then also finding another shooter in the portal. They need to find some outside shooting and attack the perimeter. Gibson has 1 more year of eligibility, and he didn't partake in the senior night festivities this year. And the best way to open up the inside is through the outside. If you can start scoring from outside, hit those 3-point shots, you can open up the inside for guys like Tanner Groves to go to work. One of the more interesting stats that I found was that of the 7 players to attempt more than 35 threes this season, which is essentially 1 3-pointer a game or more, only 3 of them shot above 38% from deep. So that kind of is a telltale sign of how this Sooners team was from deep. Not many shooters on the roster. I mean, Goldwire was all right from outside. Gibson was a knockdown shooter. Groves was actually at a high percentage, but everybody else was just kind of here and there. C.J. Nolan, actually, I'll give him his credit. He also hit threes, but he was doing it in limited minutes. So it's not like they have that guy who can come in and just off the bench knock one down for you and keep the floor spaced for Elijah Harkless or Jordan Goldwire to drive in.
Right. I mean, for me, Stone kind of touched on this with this team needs length, and he also mentioned the 2 recruits that we're getting, both under 6'6". To me, the biggest focus in this offseason has to be down low. In a conference with guys like Jeremy Sochan, Bryson Williams, and playing a consensus top 5 pick like Jabari Smith, it was evident that they could not hang with the bigger, more physical squads that the Big 12 and out-of-conference play had to offer. I said this weeks ago, this team has to have a bigger paint presence down low. OU has to prioritize boxing out, clashing the glass, and getting bigger in the offseason. That could mean bringing in guys who are bigger and maybe can help play the 5, or just getting in the weight room and getting swole, essentially. The Sooners were dead last in rebounds in the Big 12, and the weakness was evident in Big 12 games, both with matchups with Kansas, out-of-conference games with Auburn and Butler early on in the season. It was their biggest problem all season long. They have to crash the glass. They can't be dead last in rebounding again this season, or going into next season, sorry. They just got to get big. They have to be more physical down low.
I will say the one game where I really noticed that was against TCU with Lampkin.
Mm-hmm.
Lampkin, who was 7'1", 7 foot somewhere in there, probably like 260 pounds.
Yeah,
he's a big
big.
dude. He dominated Tanner Groves. I mean, absolutely destroyed him. And then in the Baylor game with Flo Thamba also had a great game against OU. So I can see your point. Like I said, offensively, I think opening up the 3-point kind of opens up the inside as well.
Mm-hmm.
So offensively, I kind of stick to my side, stick to my guns. That's where they need to probably look. But I can definitely see from a rebounding standpoint and a defensive standpoint, getting a big in there would probably be better.
And I was going to say, combining both of you guys' points, finding a knockdown shooter, and also Tanner Groves, like you said, he was a great 3-point shooter on the team, but he also needs to be able to play down low because, after all, he is a big. I felt often this season he seemed a little too soft, and that may have been because he was so tired because he was such a core foundation of the offense. And it seemed like if Emoji Gibson or Tanner Groves wasn't playing well, the Sooners were going to have an off night.
Yeah, kind of building off of his point, I think you do have to get scoring to surround Tanner so he doesn't have to be the main scorer, main scoring option, and also hold down the paint. I think it'd be huge if you have, like you said, add a second scorer so you can kind of save that more energy later on down the games where you see he was kind of tired, legs were running thin, and then they kind of lost those close games like you mentioned.
I've said that I
be
think
with rebounding too.
Somebody who would be like a perfect addition is somebody in the model of Musa Cisse from OSU, somebody who can block shots and just rebound the ball. Ethan Shagwa kind of was that this year, but I mean, he's not as big of a presence as you'd like to see. Musa Cisse or somebody like that would be an incredible addition to the OU roster, because then when Tanner Groves is on the bench, or if there's a team that's got a really dominant big down low, slide Tanner to the bench and get that big in there that can block some shots and play some defense.
Those are some really great points, guys. But when Game Day U returns, our analysts are going to move on from OU basketball and break things down nationally. You won't want to miss it. Stick around.
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move. So I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
If you need to do something to feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive. Don't drive buzzed.
How prepared is your family if a tornado shows up at your doorstep, or a flood, or a hurricane? You can't just turn away a natural disaster. That's why it's important to go to ready.gov/plan now. It has the tools and tips you need to make an emergency plan with your family. So if disaster comes knocking,
let's go.
You'll be ready to help keep your family safe.
It's just a pizza.
Yes. Make a plan today.
Welcome back to Game Day U. As team seasons are coming to a close and March Madness is slowly slipping away, what coaches do you guys think are in the hot seat?
I'm calling out a guy who Sooner fans will recognize and Blue Devil fans will recognize. Jeff Capel, the former OU coach and longtime assistant at Duke, has not done a single thing while being a head coach of the Pittsburgh Panthers. He has been their head coach, for 4 years. They have records of 14-19, 16-17, 10-12, and 11-21 this year. I'm not sure how, but it seems to be getting worse for the Panthers. This guy took OU to the Elite Eight, took OU to the Sweet 16, was under arguably the greatest college basketball coach of all time. So you would think he would have some guidance, something to bring in to an ACC team. While I know the ACC is loaded, you'd think they would be able to get above finishing 10th in the standings in those 4 years, but he just hasn't been able to do that. And I think it's time for Pitt to go in a different direction.
Well, I'll stay on the train of guys who used to be at Duke. I'll go with Bobby Hurley at Arizona State. He came from Buffalo, and he had a couple of great seasons up there, and then came down to Arizona State, joined the Pac-12. It hasn't been so hot so far, right? He had 2 straight losing seasons, this year finishing 14-17, last year finishing 11-14. 305th in scoring offense this season, 305. There's 350 teams in D1. Okay, that's pretty bad. But let me add this: 119th in scoring defense. So they were nowhere near the tops of anything in any statistical category. Finished 8th in the Pac-12 with a 10-10 conference record when numerous writers at ESPN projected them to finish 4th or 5th. Started the season 2-6 with 5 consecutive losses. He inherited a team that had made 3 straight winning seasons, had 3 straight successful seasons, and then continued to fail as he started his career here at Arizona State. 118-100 is his overall record at Arizona State. In 2017, 2018, the Sun Devils lost in the first 4. Okay, 2018, 2019, they lost in the first round. Hurley's one tournament win was just to get into the tournament. He's never actually had a tournament win at Arizona State. So I think it's about time that Bobby Hurley kind of sees that door and is on his way out. Maybe he can join Krzyzewski, or well, I guess not Krzyzewski. He's on his way out too. But so he can join the Duke staff and go back over there and learn something new and then find another head coaching gig somewhere down the line.
All right, you guys found 2 pretty bad coaches. It does not get worse than Patrick Ewing. It boggles my mind how you don't win a game in conference play, you didn't have a win away from home, and you boast a 21-game losing streak. I challenge anybody watching this to find someone in college basketball who has a worse resume for a season and live to tail the tale, tongue twister there, at the end of the season. I understand the connections he has with Georgetown, and that makes sense. You have a lot of friendly faces around. You see him in the locker room. You're like, you're doing great, man. You guys have 6 wins. That's awesome. The season's over. Oh, my goodness. Look, the connections he brought to the university as a player all those decades ago are great. but this season is a disgrace, and Georgetown has to look into a new direction. Get off the ship, get into a lifeboat, get out of town, get Patrick Ewing out. He stinks. Gosh.
Well, I'm going to let that breathe for a second.
Yeah, I got to breathe for a second.
The other thing I was going to say
gosh.
was, the connections at Georgetown I think is a big deal. I think, he's the hero at Georgetown University, right? And then last season, they were in the tournament. So they've had successful seasons with Patrick Ewing. It's just this seas's way off the map.
There has to be a fireable
So, yeah, there's definitely something you could say about that.
I was going to say, they did make the tournament last year, and everyone's saying, oh, maybe they'll make an upset. They got blown out by Colorado, and it wasn't even close. I had in my bracket, I was very disappointed to start that Friday. But like you said, great that they made the tournament, but 6-21, you can't come back from that. I don't see how you can come back from that.
Well, no team, no matter how good they are, is safe when it comes to the month of March. But March also brings room for great Cinderella stories. So keeping that in mind, which team surprised you guys the most in
The
this tournament?
team that started St. Peter's Cinderella story, the Kentucky Wildcats. 26-8, 14-4 in the SEC, and undefeated at home. Here's a little nugget for you guys. 3 teams in the SEC were undefeated at home: Kentucky, Auburn, and Tennessee. And all those teams are out of the tournament right now. So maybe you don't want to go undefeated at home in the Southeastern Conference. But with a starting 5 of Xavier Wheeler, Ty Washington, Keon Brooks, Kellen Grady, and Oscar Sheboy, who is the Player of the Year favorite and a large candidate, there's no way that they should lose to St. Peter's. And while it is a great story and everything, Coach Calipari should not lose these kind of games. This was his first round exit at Kentucky. A lot of people are saying, oh, he's on the hot seat. There's no need for that. He just needs to rebound and get these guys back in the Kentucky Wildcat mindset. But the basketball gods just had something else in mind this year.
That sounds like you're saying more of just the surprising loss because they lost to St. Peter's, because they had a successful season, right?
Right.
But I'm saying in terms of surprising team, because that's the question that was asked, right? Yeah. The surprising team, to me, Iowa State. You have to look here in the Big 12. Do you know what they finished last year? 2-22. 2 wins. Winless in the Big 12. 0-18 was their record in the Big 12. Went from last in conference to 6th in conference this year. They were projected to finish last in the Big 12 preseason poll this year, and again, finished 6th in conference. So ISU hired TJ Otzelberger, a guy who went 12-15 at UNLV in 2020 and 2021, and 29-30 overall with the Runnin' Rebels. Okay, so he had a losing record at his last job. Came into ISU and turned the program around. So only 4 players returned to this Cyclones roster, just like Porter Moser had to bring a lot of guys from around the transfer portal. Turned a 2-22 team into an 11 seed in the Sweet 16, and he had a losing record at his previous job. That's pretty surprising if you ask me.
That's pretty surprising because they were in Georgetown territory. Anyways, you kind of touched on this earlier. My surprise team is the team that either has your heart or you hate them because they destroyed your bracket and they're still going on. I have to take St. Peter's here. I have to. Everyone knows where I'm going with this. The biggest surprise of the season has to be this year's Cinderella story that either captured your love or your hate, the St. Peter's Peacocks. After winning the MMAC tournament and punching their ticket to the actual tournament, which no one gave them a chance in the first round. As you mentioned the team that Kentucky has, and it's like, oh, they'll just blow through them going to the next round. They're currently dancing in the Sweet 16 with a matchup with Purdue ahead. This one, ESPN only gives them a 10% chance, but, I mean, looking at the other games, you got to like 10% chance if you're the St. Peter Peacocks. This team has been counted out from the jump and defied all expectations and are still going strong, and I really, really, really kind of hope they win the next round, too. I think it'd be a really fun story.
It would be very entertaining, but it's also going to mess up the second chance brackets that people have made. But if they win, they would be the first 15 seed to ever make the Elite Eight.
Yeah, and there's a reason that we always call them those Cinderella stories, and we're always so intrigued by them. I mean, we're always rooting for the little guy to beat up on the Giants, and they did with Kentucky, but it's going to be a question to see whether they can keep going. I was really behind ORU last year. Of course, I'm a Tulsa guy, so I was big behind Oral Roberts.
I know I'm personally rooting for St. Peter's, but we're going to take a quick timeout, and when we come back, Stone, Dylan, and Jimmy are going to give us their predictions on all things college basketball. Don't go anywhere.
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move. So I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
If you need to do something to feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive. Don't drive buzzed.
How prepared is your family if a tornado shows up at your doorstep, or a flood, or a hurricane? You can't just turn away a natural disaster. That's why it's important to go to ready.gov/plan now. It has the tools and tips you need to make an emergency plan with your family. So if disaster comes knocking,
let's go.
You'll be ready to help keep your family safe.
It's just a pizza.
Yes. Make a plan today.
Now it's finally time for my favorite segment of the show, Pickums. Instead of our normal Big 12 Saturday Pickums, it's going to be a little different with our analysts this week. So let's get started with the NIT tournament. Now, the Sooners may not be in the race anymore, but somebody's got to take it all. So who's it going to be?
I'll take the team that took the Sooners out of the race, the St. Bonaventure Bonnies. The Bonnies are on a bit of an underdog story themselves in the NIT. They came in as the 5 seed, but they've defied all odds up to this point. They've gone on the road, beaten number 4 seed Colorado, number 1 seed Oklahoma, and then Virginia. And they're all led by guard Jalen Attaway, who averages 15 points a game, 5.9 rebounds, which is something you don't really hear a lot of about a guard, but he does. But he is 6'5", so he does bring you that length, and also tacks on an assist. He also shoots an astounding 47.8% from the field, which is better than those big guys down low who have a bunch of 5-footers and less. So I think St. Bonaventure is one of the hottest teams right now, especially in the NIT, so they're my favorite.
I agree St. Bonaventure makes it. They should be able to get through an Xavier team that has an interim head coach. However, they, I think, have just had a lucky run. It's been a good run, but it's been a lucky run. And at some point in all of these tournaments, whether it be the NCAA tournament or the NIT tournament, the luck runs out. And that luck is going to run out against Texas A&M in the NIT championship. All right, Texas A&M was a 1 seed just like Oklahoma. They slipped past Oklahoma. They're not going to slip past Texas A&M. A&M averaged 72.9 points per game. St. Bonaventure averaged 69.8. What about defense? A&M allowed 66.5 points per game. St. Bonaventure allowed 65.9, so nearly identical, right? So that means this game's going to come down to offense, right? In the NIT, A&M has averaged 72 points per game. St. Bonaventure, 66 points per game. So now you see my point start to develop. Texas A&M is going to outscore the Bonnies in the NIT championship and win the tournament.
I wish I can give you a fist bump for the pick because I'm also going with the Bonnies. I don't like the Texas A&M pick. They're not going to win. The Bonnies are on an impressive run right now with wins over OU and Virginia and a very winnable game, as you mentioned, against Xavier. The road looks pretty certain for them to get there. Give me the Bonnies to win the NIT.
Well, earlier this week, finalists were announced for the Naismith College Basketball Coach of the Year. So tell me, Stone, who is taking home this award?
You know, after Chris Beard's departure and arguable betrayal of the Red Raiders, the future in Lubbock was up in the air. But Mark Adams said, hold my hairspray. We're going to the Sweet 16 for the 3rd time in the last 5 years. Last year, Texas Tech, coming off 2 years before they made the national championship, they were 18-11, and this year they're 27-9. And similar to Kentucky, they were undefeated at home. Like I mentioned, they've made the Sweet 16 3 of the last 5 years, and Adams has really had to pull his team together through a difficult period while Chris Beard left, and now they're still playing for a national championship.
Well, I think the interesting pick here would be somebody who comes from a smaller school. Would you know anything about the Providence Friars if it wasn't for Ed Cooley and the basketball program? No,
Probably
you wouldn't,
not.
right? The Friars finished 27-5 on the season, 14-3 in the Big East Conference. That's a tough conference to win in. You got UConn, you got Marquette. Oh, and by the way, they beat Marquette in the regular season. They also beat Wisconsin. They beat Texas Tech. They beat St. Peter's. They beat Vermont. They beat UConn. They beat Seton Hall, and they beat Xavier twice. And those are all tournament teams. So.
I like what you're saying there, but my coach of the year is Tommy the Lloyd. Lloyd flipped a roster that sat around the 500 mark in the last couple years after the departure of Lonzo Trier and DeAndre Ayton. Arizona is one of the favorites to win the NCAA tournament. He won Pac-12 Coach of the Year. He dominated the Pac-12 this year. They're a 1 seed. There's not really much else to it. I think he should win Coach of the Year. I think it's kind of in a Ziploc baggie. He's got his little name on it.
Well, the good thing is, at least with Coach of the Year, I think there's a lot of different ways it could go with it, right? Guys at smaller schools, guys at bigger schools, predominant programs. It seems like there is a lot of different ways it could go, and it probably will still have to do with how far these teams can still get in the tournament.
Now switching gears to standout players, who do you predict to win the Wooden Award?
I'm going to pick a guy right here in the Big 12, Ochai Agbaji. Agbaji averages 19.3 points a game, 5.2 rebounds a game, and also 1.6 assists per game, and shoots 47% from the floor and 40% from three, which is an insane number. And also, the best players make an impact without scoring. Agbaji didn't have a great game last week against Creighton in that second-round matchup, but he did have 2 huge steals late in the game and added on a block to help Kansas pull away. He's also the biggest part of Kansas's offense, so when teams are game planning, trying to stop him, that gives other guys like Christian Braun and David McCormick more opportunities to score.
You know what the big-time players also do? They also perform in big-time games, right? Agbaji had 9.5 points per game against Texas, 10.5 points per game against Oklahoma, 13 points against Kentucky, and then like you said in that last game, 15 points, 11 points in the game before that, and 16 points in the game prior to that. So in the tournament, he hasn't really performed. You know who has played well, even in the tournament and in the regular season? Kofi Cockburn. That's my Wooden Award winner. Kofi Cockburn averaged 20 and 10 against tournament teams, and he averaged 20 and 10 in the regular season. So I think Kofi Cockburn has proved his dominance in college basketball, and he should be the rightful Wooden Award winner this year.
That's fair, but my guy is also still in the tournament and didn't beat Chattanooga by 1 point.
How much of that is on Christian Braun's shoulders, though? 14, 6, and 5 from Christian Braun is a big deal as well.
That's fair. That's fair.
Well, I'll get into my point now. My Wooden Award winner is Oscar Tshiebwe. He was the preseason favorite to win it all. I mean, you mentioned dominance in scoring. I don't think there's anybody more dominant than Oscar this season. He took it all in stride and ran away with the award and never looked back. He led a talented Kentucky squad, won SEC Player of the Year, SEC All-Defense, and earned an All-SEC team nomination. He leads the nation in rebounding and looked like a whole new player since he came from West Virginia. It's hard for me not to pick somebody who is dominant every game. No matter if his shot's going in or not, he's crashing the glass, he's playing good defense, he's an incredibly physical player, and he's always the main focus every single night.
Well, that's all we have time for you this evening on Game Day U Hoops. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media. For Stone Webber, Jimmy Wicks, and Dylan Rivera, I'm Addie Crawford. Thanks for tuning in, and good night.